I think we'll get started now. Everybody seems to be settling in and seated. Thank you very much for coming along and welcome to our STEM seminar for this evening. This is the second in a series of 4 STEM seminars, or STEMinars as we like to call them, for this year, focusing on particular learner capabilities and literacies and connecting them with STEM education in schools. And so tonight, as you see, we're focusing on making it personal and social. So let's make it personal, and I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Mandy Berry and I'm a Professor in STEM education here in the Faculty of Education. And tonight I'm going to be facilitating this STEMinar with my colleague Dr. Rebecca Cooper and with our wonderful invited guests who have agreed to come along and talk about their experiences of including personal and social capabilities in their school curriculum. So we have Nick Arnott, who is pre-service teacher and engineer from Monash University at the moment, and Nicola Bailey, who's a STEM learning leader in her school at St Mark's School in Dingley. And we have Pippa Milroy, who is the coordinator of the adolescent program at her Hills Montessori School in Adelaide. So just before we get started with our program, I'm going to do a couple of things, and one is acknowledge that there's people who are also online as well as in the room. So we're doing a live streaming of the event, and that there'll be opportunities to be able to interact with our online participants as well as you in the room as we move through, because we certainly intend to make this social. And I'd also just like to take a moment to acknowledge the ground that this beautiful building is on as the traditional owners of the land, the Kulin Nations people whose rich culture and heritage has provided the opportunities for us to be able to be where we are today. And we welcome our Indigenous colleagues and friends and pay our respects to elders past and present.
It's not too far.
So, personal and social capabilities. So attention to the status of these capabilities has recently had a bit of a resurgence, as you would have noticed those who saw the Gonski Review panel, who picked out a couple of the capabilities for greater emphasis and explicit teaching in the curriculum. And one of those was, no surprise, critical and creative thinking, and also about personal and social capability. And as teachers, educators, we might say, well, no surprise, we've been thinking about these capabilities for a long time in the curriculum and working with them. But on the other hand, perhaps what is new is this emphasis on how do we explicitly include these ideas in our planning, in our teaching, how do we integrate them into the curriculum, and what might that look like in terms of assessment, for example. So that's what we want to try to unpack tonight, and we have deliberately worked towards some provocative statements that we have put to each of our guests that we're asking them to address from their experiences of working as STEM educators in schools. So we call them provocations. And the provocations look like this. First of all, learning about personal values and beliefs is best left to the humanities subjects. It has no place in STEM. I think there was a recent New South Wales Education Minister who might be agreeing with that, who talked about STEM as dehumanising. Maybe you remember that from Rob Stokes. So we gave that to Nick. And then assessing learning in STEM and personal and social capabilities is impossible. Too hard to describe what we're looking for. And Nicola has the opportunity to respond to that one. Our third one, working in STEM-related community projects, is best left to out-of-school activities. The curriculum's too crowded already, and that's what we asked Pippa to address. And the fourth one, personal and social capabilities are not something that can be explicitly taught. They're just something students have or they don't. Well, that's something we're going to turn over to you as an audience, and we'll describe just in a moment how we're going to do that. So thanks for coming along, welcome, and I'm going to turn over now to Rebecca to explain how the structure of the evening will work.
Thank you, Mandy, and welcome everybody. So the plan for this evening is to have each of our speakers respond to the provocation that we have asked them to prepare. Once they've responded, we're going to give you a few minutes to have a little bit of discussion on your tables. So you will notice on your tables there are pads and pens for you to write down some ideas, perhaps while the presenters are speaking, but you'll also notice there's whiteboard markers and the tables in front of you can be written on. So as we go through each speaker, after they've completed their response to the provocation, you'll have a chance to also respond just for a couple of minutes. Once we've done the first 3 provocations, as Mandy indicated, we're going to hand the 4th one over to you on your tables to have a bit of table discussion about. And then once we've given you some time to have a discussion and a bit of a think about that 4th provocation, rather than having each table report back, what we'd like you to do is come up with a question for the panel. That question can be related to that 4th provocation if you would like, but it could also be about any of the other 3 or about something that the presenters have raised. So we'll remind you about that again as we go. I think we're ready to introduce our first speaker.
So let me give you, before I just mentioned that Nick is an engineer in a kind of previous and current life, and in a current life also he's working now as a physics and maths pre-service teacher, beginning your experiences in high schools, I think in the 2nd year of your program. So, yep, I'll hand over to you now, Nick. Thanks.
Thanks very much to Rebecca and to Mandy. So, to answer the big question of how STEM education can play a vital role in the development of our students' personal and social capabilities, I'm going to begin by sharing my story. So, as just mentioned, that's the provocation, and so a bit about me. I returned to university at the beginning of last year to undertake a 2-year Masters of Teaching course, specialising in teaching maths and physics in secondary schools. This follows a career over the last 25 years as a mechanical engineer, where I've worked initially as a young graduate in a water treatment company, and then through to a project engineer and onto a project manager with 2 large gas transmission organisations, which is what I've tried to point out in those 2 bottom photos as opposed to the top photograph. So my experiences have been varied, have been extensive and at times challenging. I've worked with a wide range of people, both here in Victoria, around the country of Australia, and then overseas. So I've been part of product development, commercial negotiations, personnel management, field operations, emergency response, infantry management, technical training, which was a big one towards the end, to name just some of those key areas. So I'll put that up there. So working as an engineer has given me insight into how commercial businesses operate, how government regulators operate in the sort of gas and energy sector, how the law operates around those areas, and most importantly, I think, and certainly as I go through this teaching course, how people operate. So through many of these work experiences, I've been faced with including ethical dilemmas, often how I think I should be treated, or how I think my fellow work colleagues should be treated, or in fact how suppliers or customers of the company I'm working for at the time should be treated. So these experiences have helped shape my identity, both being an engineer, but even so now, as I've grappled with often the questions of what I consider to be the right response. So, why do I want to become a secondary teacher of maths and physics or science and leave the world of engineering behind? Well, it's partly because I want to take the opportunity to share with our young people the great opportunities which I've had through studying of science, physics, maths and so on, and which took me into a career in engineering. So, but it's also, I was at a stage, and I am now, where I'm ready to sort of a new challenge, which blends the technical content with working with young people in a non-commercial environment. So, now my 2nd year, just coming towards the end of the 1st semester as a pre-service teacher, and having completed 3 placements already at 3 different schools, I can see that providing STEM education to these students also gives me the unique opportunity to be part of their personal and social capability development. So I'd like to consider some examples which I could draw on from previous experiences working as a mechanical engineer that can add to the learning of a particular topic. So if we were studying pressures and forces relationship in the physics classroom, I could use the experience of running inspection tools as I did through high pressure pipelines. And this would illustrate and enhance student learning. It also gives a good opportunity to discuss some of the non-technical challenges which I face when managing field operations, such as working with different people with a range of personalities. And it also allows me to move into a discussion about some of the technical problems I face while out in the field when conducting these operations and how myself and others around how we responded. So solutions to problems with equipment, for example, can illustrate to students the personal capabilities of initiative, assessing risk, imagination, resilience, and particularly communication, which I'd like to see develop in the students I have. These are the same sort of capabilities which I'd encourage with my students when they undertake a group experiment together or when they are researching a project, for example. So in the maths classroom, I've often considered that there sometimes isn't always a chance to use a real-life illustration to connect to the learning and then enable me to move perhaps into a story that I could share with them working as an engineer. But there is a chance to simply discuss the approach of how you might tackle a mathematical problem. So sometimes the information is not clearly ordered, or some information might be missing and needs to be found initially before moving on to solve the problem. This is an opportunity to discuss with the students about organising their information and what different methods they might consider employing to work through the problem. So, organising information and assessing the pros and cons of different approaches to use are vital capabilities which we want to see developed in our students. Another key capability I'd like to at least instill in the minds of my students while delivering STEM education is the concept of treating people equally and with respect. So, as an engineer, I could see as I sort of worked over more than 20 years, especially in Victoria, I could see the philosophy that previous generations of Victorians took to providing an almost universal provision of services like sewerage, electricity, gas reticulation, water and telecommunications, particularly through that, I guess, early part and then right through the 20th century. So it's a fine example of how largely independent of wealth, where you lived in the state, the society or the community considered important that we all should have an equal access to these considered essential services. So, as an engineer, you can stand out there and you look at the technical accomplishments and marvel at them. But deciding to do this and delivering on these goals reflects fine human characteristics which are sure to make an impression on the students in their personal development. Another example is managing long hours of staff working in the field and away from home, many days at a time, even weeks. Or it might be pressuring a supplier to deliver a product or service, often within time and budget constraints. So I'll share with you, I witnessed the gas company I work with seizing what seemed a wonderful opportunity to assist in the movement of gas to central Queensland, specifically up to Gladstone for export, which in turn I could see would be effectively detrimental, and it has come to pass, for the households and industrial, commercial users in Australia, mainly because the gas was floated on the international market by exporting it, and so you then had a gas price in Australia linked to effectively what is the East Asian gas market. So these anecdotes provide examples to young people in the classroom that whatever decisions come about, they have consequences. They can be positive, obviously developing an export industry, but also there's a negative aspect to it. And so in effect, there's really a mixture of both. And so I think that speaking about the decision consequence connection in a STEM classroom, whenever the opportunity arises in delivering content, during class discussion in the middle of an experiment, is a really great opportunity to assist in students' personal development. So just coming towards the end, I'm going to finish. I saw in the paper and on the news, and some of you might have seen in recent times, there was a prominent federal coalition members of Parliament launched a group called the Monash Forum. And so put up a photo there of Sir John Monash. The group used the name as well as his photo, and they argued for Australia to build a new coal-fired power station, and memory's right, with the assistance of taxpayers' money. However, we know Sir John Monash was a leading thinker of his time, both as a military commander in the First World War, speaking to someone just before, it was on Channel 2 recently. He was also as an engineer, and he remarked that, and it's been remarked by many, that he most likely would support renewable energy today over that of building new coal-fired power stations. So, interesting, this is a political and a science issue together, and I think it's worthwhile to raise with the students in my science classroom. A classroom discussion can be undertaken in which we consider the pros and cons, again, of energy generation from different sources, particularly with analysing the respective carbon dioxide emissions. It allows students to contrast various arguments from groups such like being put forward by the Monash Forum and what you hear may be coming from other groups. So it's an opportunity for developing students' social capabilities, whether or not they might share my particular political view or not, which I'll try not to impose too heavily upon them. So finally, I make sure that I point out to students that despite their best efforts, not everything always works out as planned and goes smoothly in life and in work, as in study always. One of the greatest capabilities I hope I see students in my STEM classroom develop is their confidence in themselves to tackle problems with perseverance and knowing when to reach out and ask for assistance that they may need. So in every mathematics and science learning moment with my students, I intend to draw on my lived experience and to help them make stronger meaning in their learning, but also as individuals more broadly, they can grow in confidence, identify risk, recognise their strengths and weaknesses, their likes and dislikes. They're developing their personal and social capabilities all the time. So there's no reason why this should stop as soon as they enter the physics or maths classroom. In fact, I think quite the opposite. I hope it can flourish. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nick.
That's all right.
Now we're going to give you at the tables just 2 minutes to have a quick chat about what you've heard from Nick, and just to remind you of the provocation he was responding to. Looking at personal values, learning personal values and beliefs is best left to the humanities subjects. It has no place in STEM. And to those of you online, please feel free to have that discussion online as well. I'll leave you to chat for a few moments.
All right, we'll keep things moving along reasonably swiftly. So hopefully you had a chance to be able to talk about that. Feel free to use those whiteboard markers on the table. That's something we'll encourage you to have in our interactive room here. Now, let me introduce Nicola. We're really happy that Nicola agreed to come along. And as you can see, we are representing kind of different sectors of education here as Nick is preparing to move into the workforce. Nicola's working in primary education and Pippa's working in secondary education. We're trying to bring those different perspectives together and think about these capabilities across learning for teachers and also learning for students. So let me say some things about Nicola before you get started. So as I said before, she's a teacher and learning leader in STEM at St Mark's Primary School in Dingley. She teaches all the students in the school from foundation to 6 in her specialist capacity, and a part of her role involves bringing STEM into the inquiry units being undertaken at all year levels. And not only that, you lead staff planning and development of inquiry for multidisciplinary approaches to learning and teaching. And I imagine that resonates with a number of people in the room, either in what they're doing or what they're trying to do with their STEM or integrated curriculum. So we threw this provocation at you about assessment, pretty difficult one, but we'll leave you to talk about both the challenges and the opportunities of working with students and with teachers on this. Okay, thank you, Nicola.
Thank you. All right, so it's great to be here. Great to have an opportunity to talk about something I'm very passionate about, and that's STEM learning and teaching. So I was a bit hesitant when I was asked to come because I don't feel in any way that I am a STEM expert. And that I do not have the answers to the capabilities yet. But what I would like to share with you tonight is a bit of a journey that we are on at St Mark's in exploring the learning and teaching of STEM and the work that we've done so far on the capabilities. So as Mandy just introduced me, I teach primary school and I teach all the students in the school. We have about 470 students with 19 classes. So at the end of 2016, our teacher librarian and our learning and teacher both retired, and their roles were then combined, and my position was created. So we had a bit of a vision when we started out. We knew that we wanted to increase the rigour of science and inquiry in the school, and that we wanted to continue the work that we'd already started with design thinking through our Genius Hour program. So I teach all the kids for an hour a week, and with a STEM focus. But my STEM focus is aligned with the inquiry topic. So last term we did history, and as a whole school, and I took a STEM focus based on that. So in 5-6 we looked at gold mining as part of the colonies. In 3-4 we looked at Indigenous technologies as part of First Contacts. In 1-2 community history we looked at canning, because there was a canning factory in Dingley that canned veggies from the market gardens. So this term as a whole school we're looking at chemical science, and with a focus on the properties of materials and bringing sustainability into that with the good and the not so good properties of plastic. So I'm teaching a variety of things, from designing scientific investigations, looking at the properties of spaghetti and packaging. And with foundation this term, I'm really focusing on asking questions, as all good scientists and engineers do. So we've also rearranged our library to incorporate, so we haven't got rid of the library, but we've rearranged the library to incorporate a makerspace. And I am now the collector of cardboard boxes and anything else that I find that looks interesting. So that's me. So as you're probably all very aware, the capabilities in the curriculum are there to address the 21st century skills, the soft skills. And with many people out there, so Ken Robinson, Bill Lucas, Guy Claxton, promoting the importance of these skills, and as Mandy said before, recently highlighted in the Gonski report. So the 4 Cs pretty much cover, so I've got the 4 Cs up there, the personal and social and the critical and creative thinking capabilities. And these are the ones we've been focusing on, especially critical and creative thinking, but this year more on collaboration. We've always been aware of them as important skills and hope that through inquiry the students would just pick them up. But this year we've got a report on them. And again, we've put that off to semester 2 because it's really hard. Yeah. Our work on the capabilities has highlighted the need for explicit instruction and for the students to be aware of their own strengths and weaknesses in these areas. So last year when we started exploring creativity with the kids, we'd ask them, how could you be creative, or how could you be more creative? And they would say things such as, well, I'm not creative, or, oh, I suppose I could have used another colour. And so when we ask them now what their responses are, they're much more about that creativity is developing something new. And that is where STEM is brilliant, because it shows that kids, that creativity is not the domain of the arts, and that scientists, engineers, mathematicians, primary school students and teachers are creative too, and that problem solving is creativity. And that's why I'm sticking with STEM and not STEAM. I just wanted to throw that in there. That STEM is a way of promoting creativity in science and maths. So at St Mark's, we are looking at a new way of designing learning that starts with the capabilities. All other curriculum areas are then designed around the capabilities. If we need to report, then we need to assess, and if we need to assess, then we need to teach. And we have to ask, what skills and dispositions do we want our students to know, do and be? And how can we best teach the capabilities and through which subject areas, because deep learning needs context. And as part of a project I'm participating in with Catholic Ed, we used 5-6 as our pilot study, and we are now designing learning this way with the whole school. Our last 2 closure days have been dedicated to learning design, whole curriculum planning, and a multidisciplinary approach to learning and teaching. But STEM has been our catalyst. So all the teachers are beginning, we are on a journey, to design all areas of the curriculum with the capabilities in mind. The PE and the performing arts teachers are on board, and our Japanese teacher is amazing. So this term she is teaching Japanese through STEM, and the kids are designing toilet roll holders in Japanese. So as you can see from the green document, that the 1-2 team have chosen a very limited amount of criteria from the Victorian curriculum to focus on for this term. In personal and social capability, their focus is resilience and collaboration. And in collaboration, we're just assessing the students' ability to use basic skills for participation in group tasks and to respond to simple questions about their contribution to group tasks. And although there are no ready-made tests, there are ready-made tests to collect data on these skills and dispositions. Teacher observations, success criteria checklists for teachers and students to self-assess could be used, and we'll be trialling some of these this term. Again, we're on a journey. So we have used videos to record students thinking in our Catholic Ed project, but that is really time-consuming and probably not very practical for a whole school, for one classroom teacher. And we're still developing our students' ability to report on Seesaw, and we're discovering that moderation is going to be a really important process as well. Again, we're still a work in progress, and before we could even think about the actual assessment, we had to identify what the students were expected to know, do and be from the curriculum. We used the content descriptors to help address the standards. We still have a long way to go, but eventually, hopefully, we will know where each student is and where they need to go next. And as we do with literacy and numeracy now. So in my experience, what STEM does is provide the opportunities to develop their 21st century skills through explicit teaching, and therefore the opportunities to assess these skills. Using a multidisciplinary approach allows the time to teach all the curriculum as long as your learning intentions are specific. So the photo you can see above there with marshmallows and spaghetti was a lesson on chemical science. We're looking at the properties of uncooked spaghetti, trying to build towers. But we had a specific focus on working as a team, so collaboration as well. So if you have a look at the wristbands they're wearing, manager, director and speaker, they had roles. They're from Primary Connections. And the roles gave them skills to work in a team and how to articulate how that team worked together. It was interesting to observe the groups who did work together and the groups where members worked alongside each other, sharing the resources, but just building their own towers. The photo in the middle on the bottom row shows Emily working on her own, always her preference. Why? I really need to ask her. And what does she need to learn to work with others successfully? And other students who are very academic and get along with other kids, but they choose to work on their own too because they're a perfectionist and they don't want anyone touching their stuff. But they need to learn to work collaboratively as well. So how do we do that? How do we assess? Assessing soft skills is really hard. And we are learning to use these STEM skills and dispositions ourselves as teachers by being creative and using design thinking as a way of learning design, by using our school context to create assessments that work for us and our students, by using trial and error. Be prepared to fail and learn from what didn't work. It's okay if it didn't work this term. We'll try again next term. The kids love it when teachers are having a go, asking for feedback and being reflective. So having a growth mindset, as we expect the students to, and learning from them. So, and also ourselves being collaborative and sharing ideas and experiences and learning to moderate to generate common understandings. So my hope is that by learning to assess our students and tracking their growth and progress as we would literacy and numeracy, we can ensure that they are prepared for the future ahead of them. And just to end, because I can't help it, it's my favourite project ever, but the one up the top with the yellow circle in the middle is my favourite STEM project, not particularly related to what I'm talking about, but I had to show you. Is the 3-4 student Alex, and we posed the question, how might we grow plants on the moon, as a part of an earth science unit, and that is her depiction of Buzz Aldrin peeing. STEM is awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicola. Please, everybody, take a couple of minutes, have a bit of a chat about what you've just heard from Nicola. I'll take you back to remind you of her provocation.
So on to our third provocation and our third speaker. It's great to hear the table buzz. That means that you're really getting into it. And I'm using my best teacher proximity and voice to get us back on track again. Okay. So, Pippa Milroy, actually, Pippa and I taught together a long, long time ago. We co-taught a science class, so it's nice to be able to invite her here to be able to speak from her experiences in a bit of a different context, perhaps. And so Pippa is the coordinator of the adolescent program, as I said before, at the Hills Montessori School in Aldgate, just outside Adelaide. She's worked in education for many years in both secondary and tertiary settings. I know her well, I shouldn't be reading this really. Pippa's background spans medical science and English literature, teacher education, kayaking, travel, writing, gardening and hospitality, all of which she sees as a suitable training ground for working with adolescents. So Pippa's provocation here is about working in community projects and the idea of the curriculum being too crowded and how you can manage those sorts of things. So thanks and welcome, Pippa.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. Firstly, I'm just so glad I didn't get Nicola's provocation. And apparently something's come in from the online people saying they're waiting to hear about formative assessment, and someone said, will you cover that? And I said, what about if I just cover no assessment? That would probably make things much, much easier. Great coming after you guys. I've got a soft spot for engineers. I live with one, my dad was one, my brother was one, but now my daughter has just entered engineering, so we need more engineers in the world. And Nicola's talk in particular really made me think hard about that sort of assessment of those, I hate the term soft skills and 21st century skills, and I don't know if we've got a good, has anyone got a good name for them? Transferable, good. Yeah, general capabilities. That's right. It'd work really well like that. But I do think that focus that she had about the importance both of observation and reflection, but that you need to give young people the tools to be able and the language to be able to reflect on those things. And so all that work where we're using the language for things is really important. Anyway, that doesn't count my 10 minutes. That was just... So to answer this provocation, is the curriculum too crowded already? Yes. And should we work in STEM-related, interdisciplinary, community-based problems or leave that for somewhere else? Yes, we should. We should not leave them to outside of school. We should do them in school. Anyway, so our context, I work in a Montessori middle school program, so I don't know how familiar anyone is with Montessori education. It's not weird, it just taps into everything that's, documented as really good practice around learning and teaching, but particularly working with the middle years. So there's been a push in Montessori education over the last 10 or 15 years, lots of programs around the world and including in Australia. But at the centre of that program, there are three things. Community, so a really deliberately cultivated sense of young people being part of a community of both adolescents, 12 to 15, 16 years, and the adults that they work with. Place is the second thing. So having a strong sense of your place. We're on a small separate campus that's set within a larger property, that's set within a local community, and that adolescent community has responsibility for both taking care of that place and developing that place. So, herein lies much with that responsibility. And from that, a word that is used a lot in Montessori education, it's one of those tricky words that people have different meanings for in other places, but work. So work with a capital W, and by that I mean the real, meaningful, actually needs to be done work that arises both from the concerns of the community and the needs of the place that we're taking care of. So much of our activity and daily sort of doings draws upon, applies, connects with, prompts and or extends the learning that goes on in both our disciplinary learning areas, maths, science, English, whatever, and our interdisciplinary projects. Students are in that program for 3 years, and I would say that developing personal and social capability, as ACARA terms it, has always been core work, even before ACARA existed. So that's always, I think it's at the heart of all of our work anyway. We've been quite conscious and explicit about that. And in our program descriptions, in student reflections, I'm going to talk really fast so I get more in, and parent reporting, student roundtables, we're always considering two threads equally strongly: the development of independence as an effective learner, both within certain learning areas and generally as an effective learner, and the development of independence as a contributing member of a community. That's the personal and social capability, and it bleeds into the other general capabilities as well. Those two areas are interconnected, but they're still able to be considered discretely, and each is obviously as important to the other. I won't rave on about this. I'm sure this is true of all young people, young adolescents in particularly. It is recognised psychological driver for adolescents that can actually contributing usefully to the community they're involved with, and being seen to have valuably done so is a really good psychological driver. Dollar signs in the eyes, being paid for your work, that's probably the most tangibly satisfying example of this, but so is recognition of a necessary job well done. Okay, I think that's, I'll skip some stuff. So tonight, so the title of what I wrote here, but I forgot to put it up there, is identifying what needs doing and then doing what needs to be done. And I hope by the end you'll be able to make sense of what I mean by that. I'm going to talk specifically about just one component in our program, and I chose it. It's actually the learning area that gets the most space in our weekly schedule, basically all of Monday afternoon and Friday afternoon, and sometimes other bits. And I believe it ticks the relevant boxes for tonight. So that's rich, meaningful projects of an interdisciplinary nature, including all the STEM connections with the STEM areas, and that it offers opportunities, really concrete opportunities to develop the personal and social capabilities and the other capabilities. I have to point this. Which bit do I push? Oh, yeah. Is that? I've gone backwards. I'm really sorry about this. I actually am capable with technology. No. Okay, we've gone on there. All right. That was the one that was meant to be up while I was talking before. I'll come back to that one later on. Okay, so terminology, we call this subject or learning area occupations. It's just a name. It could be called interdisciplinary projects or STEM projects or whatever else you wanted to call it. And we particularly call them that because of this sense of if you're occupied with something, then you're doing something and you're actually doing it for a reason. Okay, there's some purpose to what you're doing. So we believe, I didn't put the timetable up there, but Monday and Friday afternoons for a whole term, that there's so much stuff that can arise just from being our adolescent community on our property that could become an occupation. So a valid big project for a group of students to get stuck into. There's tons of work inherent in, as I said, the community and the place, but also opportunities, and I've got to hang on to that word, opportunities, that arise from being part of and our relationship with the wider community around us. So these are sort of ways they can arise. They could be out of, particular things that need to be done. Something needs fixing on the place, something needs building on the place, the garden needs work done there. We want to put in an orchard. There's bees coming. These are all the sort of more, really obviously place-based things, but running big events. We're running a cabaret festival at the end of the week. Someone's got to design and build the sets and, all that kind of stuff, that type of thing. Lots of enterprise, production and exchange. So we actually have we would love to have a whole bank account. We haven't quite got that going yet, but we've got a whole line in the school's budget that's just our community economy and all the money that we raise through different enterprises, the students make decisions about how it's gone. That's not what I meant to be talking about. Stop it. But other things in the wider community and just interests and passions. At times things come up. There's a group of students who'd really like to do some more about such and such. They'd really like to enter the robotics competition, or they'd really like to get involved in the silent film festival. All of these things are opportunities that can become those great big projects. Okay. And the point is they're purposeful group endeavours, actually engaged in doing some work, doing something, building something, fixing something, making something happen, making an event run, earning money for a certain purpose, that sort of thing. But the point is they tap into and out of all of these disciplinary learning areas. And it's this kind of fluid thing to pull on, really make it explicit, but in the moment when it's relevant, the connections to mathematics and what you'd be using there and that sort of thing. Anyway, I'll move on and I'll give some examples of that. Oh no.
Push the up one again.
Oh, okay, thank you. That was great. So, as I said, what we call occupations, you can call them. The thing I like about them is they are the closest thing that in school you can get to a slice of the real world. And anything in the real world, as our engineering friend and others would attest, is necessarily interdisciplinary. So the sort of key elements they have to have, there's got to be something that can be articulated as the central work or project that has to happen. You've got to be able to state that up front. The adults involved in each particular occupation choice that's running at that time have got a pretty clear sense of the keys of relevant disciplinary learning, the concepts, the knowledge and understanding and the skills from maths, from language, from science, from technology that you're going to be drawing on, and really setting up which ones are the really important ones to get there. Then there's the whole choose your own adventure part, although choose it, but it's driven by what needs to be found out about. So a divergence of taking on of different roles in the project, finding out different things that need to be found out, that sort of thing. And at some point in there is always both the demonstration of your work, unveiling your project, handing it over to the clients, performing it, doing it, making it happen, standing on it, whatever it is, but also demonstrations of the learning that you've done along the way. And that's something that's a very negotiated thing. Often it's, I need you to show me you can do this or you understand that. How are you going to do that within it? These are some things that I pulled out about it though. I think, and I used STEAM there, but I'll take your point. I actually think we're steamy, streamy, all of it could go there. It's the essence of that sort of work, posing problems and challenges, seeking and applying new knowledge and skills, exploring solutions, exploring technology, both old and new. There's enterprise. These are all the buzzwords going around at the moment. Tons of both social and economic enterprise. The general capabilities, there's a blend in every occupation project we take on. There's always literacy and communication, and there's always personal and social capability in there. Pretty much there's always creativity and collaboration, those sorts of things. There's choice, which we like to build in where we can within our program, and there's authentic assessment opportunities. Yep, cool. That's just a random list, so I'll talk while it's up there, but of a number of things that over the last 8 years have become occupations. Some of them it's pretty obvious that they've got STEM connections. Others you'd say, I don't see what the link is there, but I would argue that the same skills, those things that Nicola was alluding to, are built into any of these projects. And I think that I personally think we should have a broad view of what we could go after under the banner of STEM. I think it's an approach to learning rather than a separate curriculum. I'm thrilled it's getting good press. Makes it easy to argue with the parents about it and that sort of thing. One of the before I was connecting it with the learning areas, we definitely apply some or all of science, technology and maths in every single one, as well as always language. But I really like the idea of the E in STEM and the engineering aspect of it. I think for us, we call it the design cycle, but effectively the engineering and design cycle has been a fantastic tool for tackling interdisciplinary projects at school. So that it's got all these really useful things. So having a client and a brief, even if you develop the brief with the group of students that you're working with, is really helpful. It's got their built-in criteria that you identify clearly, built-in constraints, time, money, resources, other stuff we need to find out about. It's got all those needs to communicate effectively with whoever your clients are or whatever you're doing, or the rest of the adolescent community, or experts that come in to help, or we might have to go out to and seek help with, and lots of collective choice and collaboration along the way, and the reflection and review, and feeding that into future projects. So just a couple super quickly. This is the one and only occupation that all students are compelled to do when they first enter our program. We call it, because we have to have a verb in the title, we call it feeding the community. But within it, we cook lunch and sit down to lunch together twice a week, and there's always a cooking team who are on for half a term doing that. But the young students that come in must do feeding the community. They get their kitchen licence through doing it, using various bits of equipment, knife skills, hygiene, safety, blah, blah, all that sort of stuff. They also learn lots of, learn about the human digestive system and nutrition, and that's the start-up for learning about systems thinking, which is a great tool for lots of other things. Culminates in a big catering event. And that particular occupation, as I said, we do feed the community twice a week, but the skills from it ripple out into all kinds of other big projects that you can take on from. We've got a production and exchange enterprise one that's running at the moment. These guys are involved in. We've run big cafes. We've catered 2 weddings. It was like the finals of MasterChef. So on this particular occasion, a group of 10 students catered a wedding for 180 people, with a bit of help from the local butcher. But it was really, really fantastic doing it. And my goodness, the buy-in from those students when they were paid for it. They were paid $3,000 to do it, but the work they put in over that term and the out-of-hours engagement, believe me, so much STEM in there. I won't go into it right now. There's obvious ones like the design and construction projects. So the one I had up previously was, right at the start, was a deck. There was a falling down old lunch deck. Some students wanted to build a new one. They decided, shall I go back to that one? Shall quickly. Oh, sorry, Mandy, sorry. They decided that they wanted it to be a trapezium-shaped deck, and that it was on the side of a hill that dribbled away like this. So the immense amount of measurement and debate around buying and ordering materials. These guys invented a tool to be able to map the contour lines and did it with spray paint there. The argument about the materials that we had to order for it was incredible because of all the criteria and the constraints of the situation there. And what I liked here was this was a Year 7 student. We just said what needed to be included in documentation, and they come up with their own, this kid invented overlays, so, and did that sort of thing in there. Okay, I'm kind of done, but let me... and so the pizza oven one was a bit like that as well. Often, and the last thing I want to say about it is that opportunistic learning. So, I was saying to Mandy before, this kid, when we were levelling out the base for the pizza oven, for which I used an angle grinder for the first time because I had to model that I could, it was really scary. But the conversation just about how a spirit level worked, that sort of thing, and it all ends up harking back to sort of particle theory and all this sort of thing. There's so many opportunities. These guys with the grandfather who came in and helped us, they invented a thing so that they could keep the radius going over that way, the same as the radius going around. these guys were basically inventing a compass to put their thing around there. But my plea is to broaden it, the chickens, the olive harvest and making olive oil. This is in humanities. They're actually using materials to construct, limited materials to construct slum housing that they're going to live in for 3 days and that sort of thing. So surface area to volume ratio, all sorts of things are built into there. And in conclusion, like engineering, those STEM skills and capabilities, I think every occupation project contains problem identification and hence identification of an agreement on the work that needs doing. There is always consideration of that. There's most often community consultation. There's always team sharing of research and ideas and group decision making, and always communication of that more widely. Hard skills developed are often transferable to future projects, be they painting and decorating, woodwork, production design, coding, graphic design, filmmaking, those sorts of things. But the so-called soft skills are always transferable, those ones that I've just listed around project management as well, collaboration, budgeting, division of labour, team management, all that sort of thing. And many times, and this is very pertinent to our setting, and I understand that it doesn't always apply to a bigger school setting, but roles of ongoing responsibility arrive. So the beekeeper, garden managers, cafe manager, transition day host, collaborative publisher, finance committee member, and they are roles that will roll on and further develop those aspects of personal and social capability that we're talking about. I'll stop. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Pippa. Please just take a minute or two to have a chat about Pippa's talk. So great to hear you all talking and discussing Pippa's talk, but I'd like you to turn your attention now to provocation number 4. Personal and social capabilities are not something that can be explicitly taught. Students just have it or they don't. So now what we'd like you to do is have the opportunity to discuss that 4th provocation amongst yourselves. Our presenters will be also wandering around amongst the tables, so if you do want to grab them and have a quick chat, that would be great. People online, please also take this opportunity to contribute to that 4th provocation. But can you also think about coming back to the panel with a question, either about the first 3, the 4th one, or about something that they've said? We turn it over to you. For 5 minutes.
Okay, so we're going to bring everyone back into a whole group discussion again now. Just reiterating what Beck said last time about how nice it is to hear that buzz of discussion with people, and she was sneakily listening in and saying they're really on track, which is nice to know as well. So now what we have is an opportunity for some Q&A where you can either make some responses to our provocations yourself, or maybe you have some questions specifically to any one of our presenters. And so I'm looking over in this direction just to get a cue, but that's all right. So would anybody like to start us off from what they have been discussing? Either maybe you vehemently agree or disagree with something, or you'd like to find out some more about what you've heard or add your piece.
I'd just like to make a comment.
Oh, 1 second before you do.
Just a comment and a question. That last statement, personal and social capabilities, are not something that can be explicitly taught. Are we saying that parents don't teach their children anything before they get to school?
Nice point. Does anybody from the panel want to take it up? I mean, we certainly didn't say school on that, so might be taught at home.
I think one thing to acknowledge is their provocations. They're meant to get us talking, aren't they? And the table that I was at, they and probably I'll just impose my own views of it, but it's terrible. We said exactly that you know, modelling, you learn through sort of social modelling, and that the adults, not just the adults individually, but their interactions between the adults is such an immense part of that. But that thing that Nicola was alluding to about giving them language and shining the spotlight on things can help develop things for people. That was the thoughts, some of the thoughts there, but I agree. Yeah. Anyone else want to respond to that?
I want to say a little bit. So it made me think a bit about, and it's probably a good wrap for one of the units I did last year. It's a subject called literacy. And it sort of highlighted that the range of capabilities that students come to school with. And so and especially perhaps from a teacher going through a course like this, you have particular experiences or capabilities that you might think are the norm. Certainly, I'd probably make that mistaken assumption. And then if I found out on placement, there are kids who come there and they just they haven't had those capabilities effectively developed at home for whatever reason. And like I say, it was sort of highlighted. We discussed it of interest in this literacy unit. So there might be a whole vocabulary, and I'm not talking about technical or complicated vocabulary, but that just enables social interaction, personal interaction. So I think with some students or kids, you can be starting at a fairly So is that a criticism of parents or what have you? I don't know, but I think it's maybe just simply a fact. Yeah, that's my thought.
Thanks. Any questions from anyone else? That for me. Otherwise, I'm going to end up with both microphones. There you go, Matt.
Thank you, Beck. This one's to Pippa. We really saw the value of those cross-curriculum projects like the occupations you do in your Montessori school and the value of them for building a lot of the type of skills we've talked about. What are the barriers to bringing about some of those kind of projects, perhaps in a more traditional non-Montessori context? For example, we were discussing here how hard it is just to get a couple of subjects to kind of work together on something beyond just their curriculum.
I was just saying before, I wrote down lots of limitations and, I don't know, sort of limiting factors in there. And I acknowledge that the way we work is what we would call a small school model. So we've got our max is about 50 students in the adolescent program. So I heartily acknowledge that challenge. The other, I guess, advantageous condition that we work under is that the structure and the culture of our school were developed concurrently with the curriculum and the pedagogy that we were going after. So again, there's those challenges of change, aren't there, in a big school setting and a big community of adults. The other thing that I didn't get to in that talk, which was actually part of the provocation, was that thing of the crowded curriculum as well. So I did actually, after a conversation this afternoon, write down some ingredients that I reckon help. So this is my response to your thing. So I think that structurally you need a space in the curriculum where this can happen. So, and that means shouldering other stuff out of the way, doesn't it? So I think culturally, and I'll talk about the adults involved and then culturally the students. Culturally, I think the adults, whether it's two people collaborating or a whole team or a whole staff, they've got to have the courage, and I really think you've got to go, we think these things are the really core important things. So the trade-off for our students is they get a lot less face-to-face time in each discipline area in order to make room for that. And to do that, and I'll particularly focus on science and humanities, we've had to go through and go, this is going to be our core disciplinary program. Over the 3 years, we will make sure every student, has the opportunity to learn and be involved in these areas. These things, we think we can be pretty confident that we'll be able to slip them into an occupation project. So all the plant sciences in there, the food, nutrition, heaps of biology in there, certain areas of maths. We can be fairly quick in the maths room because we know it's going to be covered in the occupation area, that sort of thing. So courage. courage to identify the musts, the shoulds, and it'd be great if they got the chance to, but it won't matter if they don't, or they'll hear about it from their friend. So I think that's that. I think that the adults need to be confident enough with their understanding of the formal curriculum that they know it well enough so that their other eyes poking over here and going, oh, there's this great opportunity there, and they can bring them together a bit opportunistically. And for that, I think having tools to do that is really helpful. So your planners and that sort of thing that prompt different thinking. So they need both the capability and the flexibility to be able to plan responsively. I think in the students, I don't know if this is possible everywhere, but I think they need, and I don't know, chicken and egg, responsibility for things, so ours is the place mostly, and agency. So one leads to the other and vice versa. So that's a cultural thing to develop with the students. And then the other thing, the starting point for it was opportunity, like to be able to look out and seize opportunities. So, and I really think things like competitions and festivals, awesome. Like they've all got all the criteria and the constraints, you know, the Lego League thing, I'm sure all your schools have got a group of kids that do it. But, you know, again, film festivals, the local community having a street festival and making a project around putting a stall in that, and all those sorts of opportunities are great as well. So just open eyes to the opportunities. I hope that helps.
Is there anything from online there, Chantel?
Yep, there is. We've got Joe online, and this is in response to Provocation 4. The latest Gonski report is suggesting that learning progressions can be introduced for the general capabilities as well. Will this help personal and social capabilities to be explicitly taught, as teachers will need to explicitly assess or report on them?
I've got the microphone. So. I think absolutely, because as we discussed earlier, kids are going to come to school with a variety of skills, dispositions, talents, and none of them are the same. So you need to know where the kids are at and where they need to go next. And then a lot of those things will need to be explicitly taught because they're either not getting it home, it's something that's not natural to them, or just having that general awareness of what something is then allows them to think about it and focus on it and develop it themselves. Yeah.
And just thinking, going back to what you said again and what Pippa reiterated about language and tools, I think we have to be careful once those things become pinned down and constrained, whether they limit then what people start looking for, or whether they allow us then to have some language or tools for looking for those things. So I think there's going to be an important challenge, which is around lots of areas of the curriculum, about once it becomes extremely explicit, how does that affect the ways in which we engage with it as contained within that thing or an opportunity to expand. So I think there's some important stuff that will come from this related to continua and how we manage this as educators, what kind of agency we take in it too.
Maybe with continua, it doesn't matter so much which box you're hitting, but that you're progressing in the right direction.
Yeah, this is my table's discussion and how we contributed to all of you. So all the points. This is, I'm talking for the gifted, on behalf of the gifted students. Yes, they disposition themselves. I've written all these things, and students can't do themselves. And so are we really not looking at merging in the STEM into day-to-day curriculum? We got to, because we observe merging in social and personal capabilities within the main curriculum, and they are always an insight. So because, and if we look at the gifted students, their disposition they are dispositioning themselves from the normal and the classroom behavior, which travels from Montessori to throughout the secondary, tertiary education, even tertiary, because that problem traverses unless identified, because it is not about the person or what's happening within the classroom or within the education institute itself, but it is pushing the boundary of the social limits. For example, like from a migratory background, professional background, come here like Mandy knows, like me, like so how I raised my children, and so if I think if I stop there, like their boundary is stopped there. So they see their like parents' social and personal capabilities as an insight. So the main problem is, are we having enough resources, including space and the personnel, the educators and personnel, and the agencies. So we are many schools. I know the Roville Secondary College has got 4 faculties, like where they can cater for sports, performing arts, science and maths, and general. That's one of the very few government schools which I am affiliated, and my children were going to. But it's not my personal journey, but I see the growth of it, and so there are so many successful projects. So it's a question and a summary, or I don't know. So that's where we stop at. So anybody can say anything about it.
Say one thing, if you like. No, I forgot what it was.
It's about resources or personal?
Yes, actually, it relates to your question over there before that. This thing of, and I think you're right, I think in lots of bigger schools there are more adventures being taken in, like I said, structure and culture, so how things are structured. And I think some sort of flexibility and responsiveness in that is key. You know, I think primary schools are shifting from always the one teacher, one classroom. Boy, that would be a lonely journey, I reckon, to a lot, lots more collaboration. We've got a really collegial collaborative thing. But an example of a flex for us is our students have independent work time where they're working on whatever they've deemed they need to be working on. And we might use one teacher to support 35 students who are working independently in that time, and that will allow us to have 4 teachers on deck when we're running those sorts of projects, so you get that really close thing. So I'd be curious if people in larger schools than I'm in have got that ability to shift structurally and move their staff and their resources around. I hope that kind of addresses it a little bit.
Yes. We've got time for one more question.
One more question.
There was a comment about STEAM not being a thing, or you're not enjoying it. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on why. I guess the reason why I think it is an interesting point is that there are some people who might have anxiety about maths or science, or be told that they're not maths people or not science people, and if it's seen as something that an art person can do, gives them an open door to sort of come in and embrace those technologies.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And look, I'm not saying I'm anti the arts, because I'm not. I love them, and they do have a really integral place within our school and within society. But what I suppose my idea about the STEM just is that scientists and mathematicians traditionally are not seen as creative. If we didn't have creative scientists, we wouldn't have antibiotics. But when kids in particular are asked what's creative, they think about art. And from my personal experience, I am actually not a very good artist. And so I did have a bit of that mentality, therefore I'm not creative. As a teacher, I'm actually very creative. It took me a while to find my where I am creative. So it's not that I want to exclude the arts, and we certainly have the performing arts and visual arts as part of our multidisciplinary approach. But in terms of STEM or STEAM, I'm a little bit sceptical as well, in that places like Harvey Norman like to add the A because then they can sell more stuff. So, I don't think there's a problem with STEAM. I don't have a problem with that. I'm just sticking with STEM. Yeah. Did that answer that question? Or was that a bit too personal? Yeah, so...
We just have one more online question and then we're going to wrap up, but our presenters will be around so you can come and have a chat with them and follow up on anything that you might have been talking about that you would like to. So, Chantal?
We've got a question here for Nicola. What challenges did you face as a STEM leader?
Probably my biggest challenge was not really knowing what we were doing at the start. So it's been, we're still working it out as we go along. We had a school that had a philosophy and a culture of inquiry learning anyway. So STEM has done that, but I suppose because literacy and numeracy, especially in primary school, takes such a massive focus and they take a lot of resources and a lot of time, we were almost becoming subject-based primary school. You know, this is the time we do reading, this is the time we do maths. So my challenge really is trying to get that multidisciplinary approach so that the learning has context, and we're still not very good at the maths. So the literacy obviously is much easier to incorporate. So now the kids reading and writing will have that science, sustainability, environmental sort of focus, but we're still not very good at doing the maths. So that's my next challenge.
And I think for all of you, you've highlighted, the journey is the thing at the moment that has challenges and lights that make it very exciting as well as sometimes pretty frustrating too. So I would like to thank again Nick, Nicola and Pippa for your fantastic contributions this evening. Thank you on behalf of all of us. And Thank you for coming along, and thank you to our people online. We really hope that this format has been one that's helped you to think about, engage with these ideas around the capabilities, and it gives you some food for thought and ideas to take back to your own context to start up some conversations too. You may be interested to keep going with these things and have a look at that great advertising material on your table about further postgraduate courses you might be interested in as well. So thanks again. Feel free to stay around and have a chat. Talk with our presenters, and one more thing that...
If you do wish to pursue, follow up anything on the STEM professional learning, could you please speak to Lucas, who is
waving his hand now?
He'll be able to give you a little bit more information on that STEM professional development. Could you also please leave the whiteboard markers behind, but everything else is yours to take. Thank you.